There's Susan.
Hello,
Hello, how are you?
I'm good.
It's good. Why don't we get started? Our objective tonight is to make sure that we understand the school's priorities in what they're requesting on capital budget. And I know Sue Owen had very nicely put together a little spreadsheet that showed everything you wanted and in, I suppose, the order that everybody has agreed on. So is that correct, Sue?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
There's been a couple little changes to it, but yes.
Uh-oh. Well, you better get them out.
I know. It was more about dollar amounts that were coming through today, so I can share the updated list if you can share the screen with me.
Okay, well, we're not going to make any decision tonight until we get finished the whole town, which will probably be mid-March, somewhere in that time frame. But any changes you have, let us know. I do have one question on your list. The track and the turf field are down at the very bottom with no sort of priority number. Is that because you don't care about it anymore, or you've given up, or somebody's generously stepped up and is going to do the whole job?
No, that's probably at the way top of the list, but it kind of goes hand in hand, the track and the turf at the same time, which is what we've been working on.
But where should that be in your priority list? Is that 13 or?
That would be a decision from the group. I don't know, school committee or Pat.
Yes, Ellen?
No, I was just going to say the school committee, we have a quorum here. We need to call ourselves to order. This is a posted public meeting for the school committee. So before we can deliberate or comment on any of the topics, we have to call to order.
You have to,
What?
before you can comment, you have to,
We have to call because we posted this as a school committee meeting. So we have to call the meeting to order.
oh, okay.
To be compliant. So our vice chair is here, as is our chair. So before we can comment on anything, Sam, I'd just like one of them to call us to order.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, all school committee, I'm going to call the meeting to order. All school committee members present, please indicate so, saying aye. Mrs. Caleri?
Present.
Mr. Kearney, I do not think is present. He's absent. Mrs. Marr?
Present.
Mrs. St. Ange?
Present.
And present, Craig McClellan. Meeting's called to order. Thank you, Mrs. Marr.
Thank you. So, Mrs. Owens, you want me to talk about the track and the turf? Okay, so
Please.
they're at the bottom, Sam, because we're looking at two different funding sources for them. I just completed the CPC request for the track replacement, along with the some photos that we had taken, as well as the estimate from a vendor. And we've had conversation with Mr. Bonetti and the CPC in funding this. CPC funds can be used 100% for the track replacement. And so that's why that's kind of on the bottom of that. And the turf, in conversation with Mr. Senior, he's talked about bonding it because of the dollar.
Yeah, it doesn't make any difference whether we pay cash or bond. We still have to opine on it.
Okay,
We have to recommend yes or no. And then the financing of it comes later.
okay, understood.
So if that's the case, let's say that CPC doesn't agree to do the track, where would you put these in your priority order?
I would consider potentially
after the air handlers. That's probably based on our need where I would say it would go, but I'm open if the committee feels differently on that. I know that we actually didn't prioritize it because of the reasons that Ellen mentioned, but that would be my my feeling on it.
I would agree with that.
Committee want to
Yes, I mean, I agree.
opinion on it?
The only other thing that is a have to is the bus lease.
Yeah, I would put the bus lease and even the sprinklers because of the necessity of the bus lease and the safety item of the sprinkler replacement. But then after that, it's, you know, roof handlers or field. And I think for me, the roof handlers would take a bit of a priority over it. Although, you know, I've already mentioned my feelings about us being at the end of life for those.
So you
That
put the
field.
track and the field ahead of the Chromebooks.
Yeah, I guess I would. Yeah, that's where I put it.
Okay. We just need to understand it. I mean, you know, maybe
Mhm.
CPC will come through, that'd be great, but if they don't, then we're prepared and have an understanding of what priority order you'd like. Because we're not going to be able to do everything. I know that.
No, I understand that. And I appreciate the question, and that's where I'd land on for my answer there.
Just because I'm looking at my old pencil and paper list and I don't think things have changed since then. Can I just clarify, Sue or Ellen, who you may, so that leaves us with, if we tuck in the track and turf after air handlers, then that leaves Chromebooks, dust collection system, pilot program, classroom technology, and high school science plumbing after. Is that still what lies? Okay, I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Is everybody pretty clear on it now?
I'm clear on it. Sam, if I could, I'd like to just interject a comment of clarification to your point on how we think about debt financing. And I just want to take the opportunity with the broader school committee to explain how capital thinks of debt and why we really don't distinguish it from cash in terms of a source of funding. It really, the way we handle it and the way it's accounted for in the town and from capital really doesn't make it a different source of funding. It's simply a way of smoothing out the timing of a larger capital spend item. So to be more clear, the capital budget stabilization fund receives a certain amount of money from the town each year as an appropriation. And the very first thing that we do with that pool of money is to pay our debt service. And so if we bond something, for example, the field this year, that will show up in our debt service next year and reduce the amount of the appropriation that's left to spend on items for all the departments and departments of the town, including the schools. So we immediately, we actually have to pay this debt back starting the very next year. So I wouldn't encourage you to think of it as a source of funding so much as a way to just simply pre-spend funding that, would have been available in future years otherwise. I mean, the math becomes very clear when you lay this out on a spreadsheet, and it will become clear in the second half of tonight's meeting after we get beyond the school's items. But that's why we really don't distinguish between cash and bonds in terms of reviewing a capital request, because it's really the same in the end.
Any questions on it?
No, thank you. That was good.
Mr. Wakeman, would you
Yeah.
like me to send your group what I just sent to CPC for the track so that you have the information?
Sure, that would be fine.
Okay.
You know when CPC is going to meet?
No, all I know is Mr. Benetti asked for everything by the end of February, which was yesterday, so I'm a day late.
So it's in the electronic world right now being sent to him.
Yes, and I'll forward on to you so you could send on to your committee.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ellen.
Sure.
So Sam, Russ is planning a CPC meeting in 2 weeks.
Excuse me?
Russ is planning a CPC meeting in 2 weeks.
2 weeks from tonight?
Mhm.
Okay. So he's thinking about the 14th, 15th. Okay. Well, it would be nice to know if they're going to pay for it, because we'd love to have them pay for it. Takes the pressure off of us.
Right.
We still have plenty of pressure with other things, so
I know.
it might make a way to get everything to fit. How about that?
The other thing that we're waiting on right now is the pilot program that Lisa has proposed. And my understanding is she won't be ready until, I think, next week, but I don't know that for sure. I don't know how much time she thinks she needs. But the sooner she gets information to us, the better. We'll try to squeeze her in.
Yeah, and Mr. Wakeman, I just say thank you for your patience with that. We just want to make sure that we give Lisa the time to be as comprehensive as possible, making sure that she collects as much voice as possible. And she's been very strategic about the way she's gone about it. So she'll be ready to go on the 8th for sure. And as far as how much time, she's actually asking me that as well. How much time do you feel we can do kind of a quick version, or we can do sort of a more comprehensive version? We can always answer questions at the the will of the team here. But any thoughts on what I should give her for parameters?
Well, we have town hall, which is probably going to be a lengthy session for us. I like to try to limit these to no more than 2 hours, because some of us are old enough that we start to fall asleep, and others of us lose interest. So,
Well,
would she need a lot more than half an hour, do you think?
no, nope. Half an hour would be more than adequate.
Okay.
And I would think that might even be at the kind of the excessive end. I think we could probably do it in 20 minutes.
Okay, well, that'll work. I can schedule her first thing on the 8th and then do town hall after that.
That's great. I think she's flexible
Give
too.
her
If you,
till
she did say
give her 20 minutes. How's that?
that's fabulous. And Mr. Wakeman, she also said she could come in later if needed as well. If you wanted to do town hall, she said she could be here.
Hopefully if 20 minutes is adequate, we should be able to get through it.
Okay, that sounds great.
Next question would be, where would you put that in the priority order?
Is it in that priority list?
Yeah,
It is.
Yes,
You do 6.
It's number 6.
number 6.
Yeah, well, I guess it would be 7 now.
Correct.
Right.
But that's how we'd put it.
Yeah. Well, I made the track and the turf 3A, so,
There
Okay,
you go.
but if Sue wants to update it and change it and send out a new one, that's fine.
Okay.
thank you.
For capital budget, does anybody have any questions about schools' requests that have come up? I know Mike did.
Sam, I think it probably makes sense just to quickly tick through these one at a time.
Yeah,
I certainly have a question on number 1, so we can start
do.
there.
Okay,
My question on number 1 is I want to make sure that we know with 100% certainty that in fact we have 2 years left on this lease, because if we have only 1 year left on this lease, we need to start planning for the next lease really right after town meeting.
I did pull up the lease, and it goes through 2023.
Okay, so it expires in the summer of 2023.
Yes.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. It seems like a really silly request, but the fiscal years and the calendar years blend together, and this predates both you and Dr. Sullivan, but we missed the lease turnover not once but twice on the last lease, which took us beyond the 3-year bumper-to-bumper warranty, and at which point we were funding out of pocket for the maintenance expenses, which can be big. So it's really important that we actually know when that expires and have the next group of fleet of buses coming in as these buses roll off. So thank you for confirming that.
Mr. Wakeman, would it help if we shared the list so folks can look at, or are you happy with just going off what you might have in front of you?
Excuse me?
Would you like us to share the list electronically on the screen, or are you happy just going off of what you have in front of you?
Well, I have it in front of me in old-fashioned paper.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
If any other members of capital budget would like it on the screen,
I
sure.
think it would be appropriate to have an updated list in front of us.
Okay.
So that it's very clear. Thanks.
Okay, Sue, you want me to share it?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Oh, so someone has to enable my screen sharing ability.
Or I can share it. Because I've updated a couple of the numbers.
Oh, why don't you let Sue share it then, if you don't mind, Mr. Wakeman, just because if you update it, I wouldn't not necessarily have that.
So I just gave Sue and Patrick both the ability to
Thank
share.
Thank you.
Go
You're
ahead,
welcome.
Sue.
All right, I'm waiting to see if it will let me.
It's okay.
So
So I'm not seeing, let's see.
Hit that share screen button.
Yeah, I'm not seeing my desktop. Oh. Okay,
There you go.
can you see it now?
Kind of small. Can you hit Control Plus? Or just make it bigger in your...
Is that
There you go. Yep.
So the two items that changed, and they changed actually today, with just conversations of Nick and I going back and forth and still pulling quotes from companies, was to replace the dust collection system. I think we had 38,000, and Nick said it's going to be closer to 50. And then we got the quotes regarding the furniture and the plumbing for the high school science room. The furniture alone is about $50,000, and then the plumbing's probably going to be about the same or a little bit more. So that number has changed from 80 to 120. Those are the only two changes that we had. And that was only because quotes are still coming through as of today. I don't know if there's any questions on, anything else on the list.
Well, again, let's just tick through these. Number 2, the sprinkler heads. Does anyone have any questions on the Osgood sprinkler heads? Okay. Number 3, the air handlers. Deer Hill and middle high school. That's silent night. Okay, the Chromebooks. I had a question on the Chromebooks. I know Ron is looking into the manufacture and end of life dates on our Chromebook fleet. We actually have 2 groups of Chromebooks. One group came in roughly 18 months into the Deer Hill School before the Chromebooks were deployed at the middle high school. So we certainly have a bunch that are 5 years old. We have a larger group that are something less than that, but it really just depends on when we took receipt versus rollout. So I haven't heard back from him on that yet. I don't know if anyone else has.
No, the only comment on the Chromebooks I have is that when we originally went into this, the capital request was for quite a bit more. And we suggested to you and the schools that you go out to the parents and ask them to supply Chromebooks for the student. And they responded pretty heavily. And we ended up not having to buy as many Chromebooks initially than we thought we would. So I'm throwing that out to see if there's any appetite on the part of the schools to ask parents to supply them again.
So I believe the supply you're referring to is when we did our bring your own device model, or are you referring to a CEF grant we may have gone through? Just want to make sure I understand. So we did bring your own device a couple of years back at the middle and the high school. And that was obviously devices supplied by families. We had devices that we would give to folks, to loan or if needed, but it wasn't a situation where, we went and asked folks to get Chromes. It was just to bring your own device. Sue, I don't know. I don't want to speak to these replacements of the Chromebooks. These are Chromes that we use for MCAS testing, because we don't have MCAS testing on their own devices. We have them on Chromebooks. So these are specifically used for that and for other shared uses within our elementary schools, which are not bring your own device. We have bring your own device 6 through 12, if that makes sense. Maybe that clarifies.
So the devices that go into Deer Hill, do they physically stay at Deer Hill, or are they issued one-to-one for the students and they take them home at night?
No, these physically stay in the Deer Hill. The goal is eventually to get a full class set of Chromes in every room so they can use them when they're there, not necessarily transporting them back and forth.
At Deer Hill.
At Deer Hill.
Right. Okay. So this doesn't replace the BYOD program at the middle high school. This number is basically teachers, labs, equity devices, middle high school loaners, and then Deer Hill School classroom sets.
That's exactly it. So
Okay.
I think, Mr. Wakeman, what you're referring to in terms of that request was the bring your own device that happened at our middle and high school. If I might be wrong, but I think that's it.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I think that's correct.
So,
Okay.
so the growth in the number here is driven entirely by the deeper penetration into the lower grades at
That's right.
Deer Hill.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And if and these are displacing iPads, I assume, in those lower grades?
No, we have some iPads that we use in grades PK through 2 primarily. Remember, they start testing MCAS on in grade 3, and you can't use an iPad for that. You need to use a device such as a Chromebook. So
I thought we had a mixed environment at Deer Hill, though. I thought we had both. I could be
There
wrong.
are some, yeah, no, that's correct too. We do have some use of some iPads, but I believe I can't speak to the exact amount of that. It'd be like a Lisa question.
Okay, but this effectively moves them entirely to Chromes.
I believe so. I think they're pretty much there.
Okay.
That's kind of where we're moving anyway. It's at the lower levels because of the, what the iPads provide for them, for the younger kids, in terms of, they're being able to tap on the screen and all that we really invest in the iPads at that level.
Okay.
PK 2.
Some of those enrichment apps that we use, especially now even more because of our, I know we're not in remote learning anymore, but I feel like the kids are now more deeply into like Lexia and other apps like that. Some of them are just better and easier used on an iPad. It just like translates better as an app rather than opened in the browser.
Sam, I have several questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Okay. Just in general, I'm curious as to what steps you've taken to reduce the amount of Chromebooks to a minimum as opposed to anything above a minimum, given the pressures on our available funding and with the number of requests that the schools are presenting to us today. I think we really need to be sure that in all the line items, we really are trying to find the lowest possible outlay. So some of my questions go to that concern or go to that interest. So my first question is how can we reduce the number of Chromebooks? And this is my lay person's outlook. How can we reduce the number in a post-pandemic environment, that is in a return to on-site learning? If the useful life is 5 years, why replace Chromebooks at 3 years? And here too, I am not familiar with how Chromebooks are used in a learning environment, but I do know that a Chromebook basically connects to the cloud, and the cloud provides all of the applications and software that a user needs. So again, this may be naive, but it feels to me like a Chromebook and its processor should be able to keep up with what is known as thin client, what is known as the technology that allows an end user to connect to servers that provide all the software that's needed. So again, it just goes to, can we not use these for a longer period of time to keep our costs driven down? I have some questions on the faulty batteries. This may be long past answered, but what remediation can we pursue on faulty batteries in Chromebooks? You know, did we try to get some kind of warranty remediation on those? And then how can we be sure that we will avoid this problem or other unforeseen problems in the technology itself in Chromebooks? And by that, I mean, if we are choosing Chromebooks that are brand new to the market and have not had a period of a year or two or more in the field where the problems have been shaken out, I would want to know that what we're buying are tried and true, are proven, and don't have these avoidable problems like batteries that swell, for example. So those are my concerns on Chromebooks.
Okay. Well, some of them, you know, certainly I wouldn't be able to speak too lucidly about battery bloat and the science behind that. I would say that our bring your own device efforts, I think, have shown that, you know, we're really trying to think fiscally responsibly, you know, in a world where so much of our learning does involve one-to-one technology, and moving to that at the middle and high school is certainly a fiscally conscious enterprise, and having devices that we have the kids use in school, which, you know, are Chromebooks, which are on the cheaper end of devices and are much easier for us to control rather than having the kids go home with them, is also I think, fiscally conscious, as is the fact that, you know, we do need devices to be able to have our students in grades 3 through 5 take, actually 3 through 12 through 10, I should say, take MCAS testing. And there's some significant problems having students do MCAS testing and they have to do it obviously on a device, but doing the MCAS testing on a bring your own device model has significant issues, and you know, that our tech is not in support of. So, you know, I guess, and then there was some other questions regarding what we use Chromes for in terms of learning models. And I actually think that Lisa Radden will be able to get to a lot of that as she talks about what we're going to be doing with our, you know, technology pilot in some ways, because, you know, certainly in terms of a pedagogical solution, we have a lot of learning station work that you can afford, you know, a lot of sharing of Chromes and a lot of one-to-one Chrome work, working on learning management system such as Google Classroom, which is something that is nicely accessed by use of a Chrome. And then you had a question about the most economically viable model of the Chrome, and I totally would defer, you know, to Ron and to Lisa Radden on that one. And I could get you that information, but I just wouldn't, I wouldn't know it right now, Mr. Dick, actually. So, but anyway, that's the best I could probably do for those answers. But anybody in the team can certainly jump in, and we can get you a deeper answer to some of those. I realize there was a little surface on some of the areas, but I can get you that for sure.
Let me just clarify what it is that I'm after. I certainly understand how the Chromebook is a very useful tool in public schools. My question really goes to, have we done everything we can to minimize the outlay. So if that calls for sharing Chromebooks, I don't know what MCAS testing schedules are like, but would there, if a Chromebook is used once for MCAS testing, could it not be used in other ways so that it's not just being used for once a year tests? That's the kind of assurance that I would love to have, is to really know that the schools are doing everything they can to drive down these costs and being very frugal with the outlay so that we can afford more or afford other expenditures that you're requesting.
No, I appreciate that. And right now, just so you know, we are moving around Chromes for each individual grade level when we do have an MCAS testing situation. But I mean, the Chromes primarily are an instructional tool, and a learning tool. But what we do now is, because we do have, testing in math and ELA and science in grades 4 and 8, and then whether it's biology or in science in the high school, and then of course we have testing in grades 6, 7, 8, and 10. And those subjects in ELA and math, and of course I mentioned 8th grade having science. So we do move those Chromes and we borrow from the different buildings to make sure that we outfit all of our students with Chromes when we create a secure MCAS testing environment. But primarily, it's not, the purpose of the Chrome isn't for that. It's for learning that's happening in the classroom. But I just want you to get a sense for that kind of multi-use, because remember, even though we are bring your own device 6 through 12, we're not using those devices for our MCAS testing because it really isn't a tenable situation with an MCAS test.
I think it's also important to point out that, recently we've kind of beefed up the literacy and math curriculum at the elementary levels, and those Chromebooks are used nearly daily to engage in just the basic curriculum and also to extend what's happening in empowering writers with the Bridges program. My kids in grades 1 and 3, and I know kids in other grades, are using those tools as a part of both literacy and math curriculum constantly. So it's just, yes, of course, at MCAS time, they're in high demand so that a whole grade level can test at a time. But every other day of the week, those carts are a hot commodity. Everyone wants their Chromebooks. You got to book. I mean, is there a booking system, Dr. Sullivan? Right. So yeah, that's like the hottest thing in town. Everyone needs the Chromebooks.
There's a lot of student engagement and a lot of collaboration happening between students that really fosters creativity and critical thought. I mean, again, there are ways we can accomplish that, and we do in other ways. But then there are some things that technology does that may redefine an experience for a student as well. That you can't get necessarily from a lecture or even a movie or something. So.
Superintendent Sullivan, if we could get an answer on the battery question and the assurance that any new purchases are going to be on models that have been shown to be free of defects.
Right.
I'd appreciate that.
No, I also appreciate the question, and I guess just to follow up with that. So this is really concerning the fact that they have a 5-year life, and what you're seeing is some battery bloat at year 3. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't think that's what I'm saying. There's two things. One is, if the useful life is 5 years, why are we replacing Chromebooks at 3 years?
Oh, I hear you. Okay.
And then a different question is, can we be sure that whatever Chromebooks we do buy are proven commodities and have a track record of working in school systems to the workload that you need them to work at in terms of time and so forth, that they are going to be trouble-free. And then finally, just the question on the faulty batteries, did we recoup anything on the faulty equipment, which I would assume and hope that they're covered under a warranty?
Okay, that's very clear, and I will ask that. That's a Ron Menard question for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, it's Brian. I did trade emails with Ron late last week, and he's assured me that no one intends to replace Chromebooks at 3 years old. I think with the passing of time, perhaps people lost the nuance that there are two groups of Chromebooks, and the Deer Hill School Chromebooks came in, a full 18 months ahead of the middle high school. And so he's just simply getting the numbers off the management console as to how many are truly at end of life, and the number in this request will be adjusted accordingly, to the extent that we have Chromebooks that still have a few years of life left in them.
I'd be curious to find out why 5 years is designated as end of life.
So,
What the figure would be.
this is a real thing. You can Google this and see it. But Google does do end of life support 5 years from the last date of manufacture of a Chromebook model. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the Chromebook no longer works after that. It's just that as their cloud-based software continues to evolve, they will not go back and make sure that it continues to cooperate with the older device. So I'm sitting here right now in a 2013 manufactured Chromebook. Okay, it works great, but there are other 2018 Chromebooks that don't work great, just depending on when the model was end of life. Actually, I guess they wouldn't be 2018; they'd be 2016. But sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Any other Chromebook questions?
Mute here. Sam, just one from me. I guess the only thing I would want to be sure of is that the Chromebooks will not overload the network, or if it does require additional cost for actually upgrading the network, we would know that as you continue to expand their use. I guess that's the key question. It's always been the key question, to make sure that the IT system can support whatever use you have. So just to be sure that you can, that's all.
That's a very appropriate and good question. The Ron and team have done a great job building our infrastructure. So that needs to support it. That's absolutely true, and it will. But I will make sure I ask that question specifically.
Thanks.
Well, we should be asking that question of any application that's going to be used on the town system. But that's something else. Okay, how about the dust collection system? Anybody have any questions? Moving on to, well,
No question, but just a comment. I want to make sure that everyone understands this is not going to turn that wood shop into a self-cleaning room. Most wood dust falls to the ground, and that's a really crowded and busy space with all those machines and all the duct work and all the storage that they have going on in there. And so, for this system to really, it'll clear the air and it'll help people breathe in there when they're running the saws and whatnot. But in terms of keeping the room clean, that's somewhere between, the shop manager and the custodian. And they probably need some form of compressed air nozzles that they can sort of puff and blow the stuff around, as opposed to trying to broom between all these pieces of equipment.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that the flow of air and the air changes in the room, is another concern with not having this dust filtration system, dust collection system operating appropriately, and that's really, it's not the reason, but it's the reason that brought it to the forefront, to be completely transparent.
I have a question on your increase in the request. I thought I heard you say it increased by 20,000, but could you just level set me on that? And what is it that is driving the increase above your initial estimate? Was the initial estimate accurate at the time and we were surprised by a quote, or did we not really estimate it more accurately? Was it just a rough estimate?
I defer to Nick and to Sue on that, to that answer. To do much
Yeah,
better.
I can touch on that. So The initial cost of 38,000 was just for the unit itself. That did not take into account the fact that to properly utilize this going forward, it needs to be moved from its current location, which means we have to pour a cement pad to support the weight of the unit. Then it does not include the cost of the new ductwork needed from the machine to the existing ductwork that will stay in the classroom. And then there's a little bit of additional cost to properly hook up with flex hose. Just to get throughout the years, they've kind of taken some of the internal stuff off, so it needs to be revamped to work properly if we're going to utilize it in the manner it's supposed to be. So that's like all in cost, fully installed, ready to go.
And what are the odds that someone in the future will undo the work that you've done?
Inside the classroom?
Well, you just mentioned that some hoses had been, I hope I got this right. You'd mentioned that some hoses had been installed and then removed. Did I get that?
That was a result of the dust collection system wasn't in operation anymore. So instead, they were hooking up shop vacs to all the equipment. So they removed, and I mean, it's been years, so things just kind of get taken off and thrown to the side, and they need to be replaced, no more than like 5 to 10 foot sections here and there. But they have newer technology now with flex hose that can be pulled around. So it's a little better than hard ducting everything to all the machines. So you can kind of share ducting this way.
Okay, thanks.
Excuse me, Nick, so this also includes the outside, there was an issue with the collection bin?
Yeah, so where it's located right now, it doesn't lend itself to be emptied correctly, because these barrels, when they're full, are 500 pounds, and where it is right now, nobody's going to be able to empty it properly. So it will get full, no one's going to empty it, and then it's not going to be used, and then you'll damage the machine. So if we scoot it over so it's down, I don't know if anyone knows the area it's in, you can literally pull a vehicle up right there. You have your little dolly that's made for it, and then we can actually service it correctly going forward.
Okay, so that is included in the 50,000.
Yeah, it is.
Anybody have any other questions on the dust collection system? Pilot program I'm going to put off till next week when Lisa's ready. So the next item would be plumbing
Sam,
school science room.
Sam, before you move on the classroom technology pilot project, we have a letter, I think it's from Ron, with his evaluation, and he had a number of concerns. And I would hope that we could get this Ron's evaluation updated for next meeting.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I would hope that Lisa's going to do that.
Me too.
We need to remind her.
Yeah, Lisa and Ron are collaborating and talking. I mean, we're meeting tomorrow. So, I mean,
Perfect.
all of that will be, as part of Lisa's presentation.
Okay.
Anything else on the pilot program? Let's move on to the plumbing for the science room in the high school. Better be specific. Any questions on it? Okay.
Sam, maybe just a little explanation of the increase. It was for furniture. Is that what I heard? The $40,000 increase from the last time we saw it?
What's this on the plumbing?
So initially it was just a quote for the plumbing,
Okay.
and they hadn't included the furniture. So we got the quotes from Flynn Scientific on what the actual setup of the rooms would look like and what the cost of it would be 7 science lab tables setups. And then on the flip side, Nick has been speaking with plumbing and electric to do all the hookups, which the combination of the two raised it from like 80 to 120. I don't know, Nick, if you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, so I'm actually meeting with contractors tomorrow and a little later this week, just so they can button down numbers a little better for us. So the plumbing is about 80. And that's just off the cuff from just talking to the plumber on the phone. And luckily he just did a science room in Marshfield, so he kind of had some basic numbers to go off of, just to give me something to talk about tonight. But you know, there's some peripheral stuff that even I didn't think of. So the room's going to have a gas shutoff system like the other science rooms have. So that's another additional cost. It needs an eye wash station, shower station. Those are not cheap because they require an 1.25 inch water line. So you have to go all the way back somewhere that has 1.25 inch. So there's certain things that just add a lot of cost to these types of projects. But that being said, 80 is kind of a good ballpark for the plumbing. Electrical is going to add additional. I just do not know yet. I'm meeting him tomorrow. It's definitely not going to be remotely close to that. It'll be a lot easier, but still an additional cost.
So we'll need to have a really good estimate rather than something.
Yeah.
as
And
rough.
that's why I'm meeting with them this week, because we have a layout of the room, which is going to give them a much better idea of where they need to run things so they can be pretty accurate with their costs.
Okay, so the plumbing's 80, the furniture was how much?
I just wanted to ask to have that revised estimate sent out to us prior to our meeting.
Sure.
Thanks.
The furniture was, I believe, about $40,000 to $50,000, depending on which plan they went with.
Okay, so it feels like this number is going to go up, right? I mean, 80 plus the low end of the furniture gets you to 120. The high end of the furniture gets you to 130, and that's before electric.
Yeah.
And plumbing.
In all of these requests, it's very important to be as accurate as you can. I realize you don't want to ask for more money than you need, but if you don't ask for enough, when town meeting makes the vote and the project gets underway and all of a sudden you're 80% of the way through and there's no money left, then where are we? So keep thinking long term.
So after Nick gets some updates, I will update this list and get it all out to you before Monday, next Monday.
That would be great, Sue. Very helpful.
Sure.
Sam, can I ask a question?
Yes.
The thing that I suppose is the most difficult is to fully spec a job like this. However, once you've understood all of the difficulties associated with it, whether or not you got to get 1.25 inch water lines for your face sprinklers or whatever you're doing, you do need a spec that you can actually use to solicit bids on.
Yeah.
What always worries me is to have contractors tell us what in fact they're going to charge us. I would rather have a spec say, this is what you must do, and this is what our expectation is. You can therefore bargain with people associated with an exact definition of what you're looking for. I don't know, Nick, if that's what you can do here. I understand the difficulties of pulling that off because I heard you. But nevertheless, it really seems to me you really need to have the ability to get multiple quotes for doing this job.
Yeah, and this won't be hard to do that with because it's pretty generic. It's just we need water supply, drain, and gas run to these areas. And we already have the layout that company Flynn sent us a layout of the room where each station will be. And it's just a matter of telling any electrician we need power there or the plumber the same question. So there shouldn't be too much room for interpretation on this one. So it should be pretty straightforward.
Are there other forms of furniture that compete with the one that you're looking at?
I'll hand that to Susan. They found that stuff.
I believe there was like seven different room setups. We're all probably within $10,000 of each other, depending on how elaborate they got. So we kind of left it up to the principal and the science teachers to decide, what would be the most up-to-date science room for us. If we're going to invest in it, we might as well, go with something that's going to be a higher grade. But it wasn't a big difference in price.
Okay, so could we ask the principal and the science teachers to take another look at other options that might help us get the outlay cost down?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the science lab?
I have one, Sam. This is Francine.
Yeah, go ahead.
Have you all looked at whether or not the CEF, the Cohasset Education Foundation, would help fund any of this?
I have not.
Any other questions? Let's move on to the security fobs. Any questions?
Sam, is this
We
the
had a
same?
number, Michael, I think.
Yeah, is this the same item as the DSX HID building security expansion project as that Ron Menard wrote about?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
These are the fobs for the remaining doors at the individual schools
Yeah, I don't know if it was included in there.
in the card reader. I don't know if it was included in what Ron, I don't know if it was included what Ron sent.
Okay.
I don't believe so. I believe that was more alarms and this, I don't think so. I think this is just a different, although I don't know, I'd have to look at that again because I mean, Ron was certainly involved with this and knows all about this request. He was there when we formulated it. He's the one who we, went to with these requests. So I'm just not sure the way you articulated that, if that's the same thing.
What he says here is that the project is a district-wide project, encompasses extending the existing door security system to include new hardware, wiring, and programming for additional doors in all three buildings.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
That is.
that is it.
Okay. So my questions are these. What are the shortcomings in door management now? And how does this address that? He also mentions that no fiscal year 22 operational funding is being proposed to support this new DSX HID extension. So I'm trying to reconcile that statement with the request that's in front of us now. And I guess it's not fair if he's not here to answer that, but
Yeah, I'd like him to answer that. I mean, it isn't something that we've put in our operational budget to add. That's why we're going to capital. Frankly,
okay.
These are new. They're certainly needed now in the pandemic, post-pandemic. They're still important because we're going to be doing a lot more outdoor classroom type activities, and to be able to access the doors and not have any possibility of someone propping a door, creating a security breach, or it's just, this is a much more, I think it's a safer, certainly a more efficient way to provide entrance and exit from buildings.
Okay. And we're confident on the $40,000 number?
I believe so, Sue.
Yes, we are, because we've done multiple doors already, so Ron knows exactly what it's going to cost us to finish.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Remember, we can restrict and grant access to these door fobs as needed. We have with our security passes, so it is a secure system in that regard.
Hi, can I just make a comment? I think what we've been discussing is a report from Lisa Radin, because I have the dialogue, Dr. Sullivan, that I think you would forward it to us. I don't think it's from Ron Menard.
Okay.
It's exactly what Mr. Dick read from, and Mr. Dick, does it include number 2, classroom technology pilot program?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay, so I think this is from Lisa Radin, not from Ron Menard, just for clarification.
Okay.
That makes sense. All right. That I think I understand. I know what you're referring to now. Obviously Lisa will be here on the 8th. That might be a question for her too, if we want to add that question, but
Okay. That'll work. Any other questions on, I'm going to call it Fobs. So let's move on to the access road, which everybody is going to put in a claim for new shock absorbers if we don't get it fixed, right? Any questions on it?
Well, Sam, what I had asked was to put this, first there were 2 things. One is the real problem is a bad patch job near the center of the road by a drainage manhole. It's just a lousy job of patching. But number 2 is when we had Brian Joyce in, we said, you got to put this in the context of all of the work that needs to be done in town on the roads. And there are many roads infinitely worse than that road, I can tell you that are not apparently on the list these days. So we wanted to have a prioritized list of how the money, Chapter 90 and town money, would be spent on roads. And until we know that, it's pretty hard to judge whether just putting this in as a patch job or trying to completely redo that road shouldn't be in context with redoing roads which are in desperate shape in this town. So.
Well, should we really ask Brian Joyce that?
Yep.
Instead of, it's not fair to ask the schools.
Yep, that's right.
Make a note.
yeah, except we're not, respectfully, we're not looking at this. I understand your purview, but we're not looking at it as a road as much as part of our complex. It's that is utilized.
I understand.
Yeah, but I hear I hear what you're saying. We're not viewing it as a road per se. It's really the main exit and entrance to our flagship schools.
It's a driveway.
It's a driveway. Yes.
It's a driveway, and I think looking at this driveway from Pond Street up to the Alumni Field area, if the area that's in disrepair can be fixed as opposed to replaced and completely resurfaced, I think that's a very worthwhile endeavor to take a look at. I just want to comment that this also is an access for pedestrians, for kids who walk to school, coming up Pond Street from either direction, that they go up that driveway, and I just want to make sure we have student drivers as well, that access there, that it's safe. So if it can be repaired and be safe, I think that's a good option.
Thanks.
Well, we'll see what we can find out. Next would be the sidewalk and curbing, and this relates to what you just said, Ellen.
Right, it's the same driveway, just further up when we did our walkthrough, further up, closer to Alumni Field and around the circle.
Anybody have any questions on it?
Well, the only comment I had made before was that there is obviously mechanical damage to the curb from approximately Pond Street up about I don't know, a couple of 100 feet. Obviously done, unnecessary damage has been done there. And replacing it without understanding what in fact caused that and how to prevent it happening in the future is a critical question. It is not obvious why that is so badly damaged as it is now, because it is all very, very new. So I would ask that that be researched before we start putting more money in and just having the same thing repeated again.
Well, it could be from a plow, it could be from something else, who knows? But we need to find that out. So I don't know if anybody in the school has any idea of what might have caused that.
No, I don't. I have no. I respectfully don't know how we go about finding that out. I mean, I think your guess, Mr. Wakeman, was pretty much aligned with what I would think. It was either a plow or some kind of larger vehicle that may have damaged that. But though, I mean, the whole thing needs to be repaved. It's kind of as simple as that. I understand where you're coming from with the damage. I'm not going to contest that. There was certainly damage done where you're saying, and it is a newer area, but
Right.
I guess I'd distinguish the repaving from the curbing. I mean, they're two completely different animals. When the road goes bad, we have to repave it, right?
I apologize. I forgot we were talking about the curbing. Yes. So, okay, I take that back. Yes, the curbing is damaged. I just wouldn't know how it was damaged. I apologize for that.
So look, we can speculate on this, right? The damage is right down the ridge. I strongly suspect somebody with a pickup truck and a plow put two wheels up on the sidewalk, two wheels down on the road, went right down the sidewalk and didn't have the plow at the right angle. So it literally went right down the ridge of the sidewalk and ripped it to shreds. I talked to Nick about this just to see if, his guys could be more thoughtful about it. And he kindly pointed out that this is outsourced. If we outsource our plowing, this is just going to happen over and over again unless we come up with a better sidewalk design, or we remove the sidewalk from the outsourced plowing job and maybe have the town sidewalk machine do that sidewalk. But I'm really, really hesitant to throw $200,000 at something that's just going to repeat itself. Next time an outsourced plowing contractor comes in there and just does it again.
Well, it might make sense to get rid of the curb and have as level as you can leading into the sidewalk with some white lines painted. I don't know. I'm just throwing things out.
I'll throw one suggestion where you could save what you've got now, which is to round that edge. We have done that in other places in the town where damage was potential, and we simply rounded the edges of that curb mechanically. And therefore, even the damage that's there now could be rounded and retain at least the value of a curb, which I believe is useful. So it is a possible solution, at least to the portion that's mechanically damaged, to round it, but leave the actual curbing in place. So that's an alternative. We have done that in other places. You might see that on the end of Elm Street, for example, in front of Fleming's, where we did that, which made sure that we didn't damage the curbs, but we allowed that curb to be at least a barrier without necessarily having cars which ride up over it destroy it.
Yeah. Would DPW do this work, or you'd hire somebody in to do it?
Well, it's somebody with a grinder. It's not very hard to do. So usually a mason would do this.
Yeah, okay. That would certainly be worthwhile investigating.
I to your point, Sam, I think it would be a safety issue if it were all one level. Even if you had white lines, there's a lot of new drivers coming into that driveway that I think it would be a safety issue because you've got a lot of walkers, I think, as Dr. Sullivan has said before too.
Yes, the other.
And I'm curious, what's that?
No, I said the other thought comes into my mind is to put a bunch of 12-inch bollards in. So who's ever causing damage hits the bollards and does more damage to their truck than anything else.
Well, that might keep them away from the curb, which is the goal.
Right.
Right.
I had one question. While they're listed as two separate projects, the resurfacing and the sidewalk and curbing, does it make sense that you would want to replace or fix the sidewalk and curbing first before you repave the road? And
Probably. I'd leave that up to a paving sidewalk repair person.
Yeah, I don't know the order of that either. I know they both need work.
right.
Any other questions on the sidewalk?
Just a quick answer to that, Francine. The answer is yes. You do the curbs first, you do the actual asphalt second.
Okay.
Yeah.
You could potentially put in a guardrail to keep the plows off it.
No, that's another thought.
Mhm.
And that would protect any students on the sidewalk.
Well, we have to think of the aesthetic value of it too now. Just remember, I mean, it is a school and a school area. I just want to be careful before we put Jersey barriers up or anything.
Yeah, no, we're not proposing Jersey barriers. Patrick, I was thinking either the wooden ones,
Oh, okay.
or alternatively like a continuous sort of pipe rail, like perhaps the down at Cunningham Bridge, something along those lines. Just enough to keep the vehicles with the plows away from the curb. I mean,
Yeah,
it's going to be a $250,000 asset by the time we get this thing replaced. I just hate to see it destroyed again.
No, I hear that. I mean, we just have to be mindful of safety with students,
Right.
Everything that comes from that, what they might do on the rails or all that.
No, but you're
Fair.
talking about spending 200,000 to get that replacement done. And a guardrail might be much less expensive to prevent having to spend another 200,000.
Look, I mean, the other choice is, right, bring this particular stretch of plowing back in-house so that, we've control and accountability as opposed to just some random plow driver.
Yeah, true. I imagine it's plowed in-house anyway.
It's not. Well, maybe I'm wrong, but Nick suggested it was not.
Nick says it's not.
Yeah,
Nick, you there?
Yeah, I believe the DPW contracts the high school.
To a third party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, on this area, remind everyone, if I'm not mistaken, that on the opposite side of the circle, we've already done work and replaced the curbing with granite curbing. So remember, this is a circle that goes up and around behind the high school. So we kind of have to look at the whole project and what we've already done, because this was the last phase of a 3-phase project. Excuse me, when we started this a few years ago. Nick, is that correct, on the opposite side of the circle where you come out of? We've already done a lot of work there with granite curbing.
Yeah, we went with granite for that exact reason, I believe, was it'll hold up a lot longer. And if you break that, you're probably breaking your truck at the same time.
Right, so I think from the lower lobby doors where we go in for town meeting, straight out to the end of the building has been redone, as well as I think part of in front of where the blue doors are that go into the locker rooms. So we have maybe a little less than half of the circle, and the picture that we had from our first presentation shows the opposite side of the circle.
Okay.
And does this price include granite down the sidewalk all the way down the drive?
Sue, do you know that? I don't know.
I don't know where that, I believe the DPW is the one working on that, on this portion of it, so I'm not sure.
Okay. All right,
Correct.
so they handle the outsourcing and they're handling the contracting. This sounds like we should cover it in the DPW conversation and not bother the schools on this one.
Yeah, I would think so. Any other thoughts on the curbing? How about the bus parking lot? I don't understand exactly where this parking lot is going.
I don't think we know either, Sam.
No, I know that,
Right now, we're trying to find a place to park all our buses.
Jason Federico and a few others are working on this to potentially utilize some of our land in between Deer Hill and Osgood, but I do not know what they've come up with. Plans have not been shared with me yet.
Michelle, do you have any information on that? I know you said you had,
So yeah, the town is actively working to see if there are any sites available that we can perhaps maybe purchase land or repurpose land for the school bus parking. We've definitely looked at all of the other locations in town that seem feasible, but for one reason or another, there are definitely challenges with those locations. So we are actively working on it. We don't have anything concrete as of yet. Jason did do some drawing design work with Cavanero behind the Osgood School. We're a little bit limited there as to what we can do, and the price tag is a little bit higher than what is here. So not sure that that's our best option either, but we are actively looking into it.
Are we sure in trying to do something with this?
I'm sorry, Sam, you broke up.
Are we premature in trying to look for money in fiscal year 22, since it seems like we're sort of casting around on a big picture, but don't have anything definitive?
I don't think it's premature, only because we do need a solution in place for the beginning of the school year. So we are actively working tirelessly to find something quickly.
Okay.
Sam, could I ask a question on this one?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Michelle, why did the DPW decide that the space which they had been using at the DPW garage is now no longer available to the buses?
So Ralph, to the best of my knowledge, I believe it's because they had to add additional containers to that area, and there was no longer enough space to store the school buses. That's how I understand it. I'm not sure if I'm correct, but I believe that was the reasoning.
that's what I heard as well.
Maybe they could find a different place for the containers, which doesn't have to be paved and lighted and secured and everything else. It makes more sense to find a place for the containers, the container actually, than to actually find another spot for the school buses. This does not make a lot of sense to me, to be honest with you. Anyway.
Well, if you do the buses, you got to pave it and prep it. If you do the containers, you can probably just pop them on whatever is there.
That's right. That's right.
Be a lot less expensive. Anybody other questions on the bus parking lot? So then we have the flooring and cove base at the gym entryway. Any questions?
I guess the only question is there any reason we couldn't repair those tiles which are curled or up? And is it absolutely necessary to replace the entire flooring plus the cove base? Is it really necessary?
Well,
Or is it more aesthetic than anything else, I guess?
this is definitely more aesthetic than anything else, Mr. Dormitzer, but it is it's such a high profile area in our schools because it's right where our gym is. It's our main entrance to our largest building, and it's really the first impression people get of Cohasset Public Schools, and for many people, the only. So it's just it is an important, albeit aesthetic area.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? None? That's very helpful. We'll try to work through some of these areas and get more information. And I will let everybody know when we're going to meet to try to decide what we're going to recommend for town meeting. It probably won't be until the end of March, but I will copy you on our agenda.
Great.
But if you have anything come up, let us know.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairperson, this is Craig McClellan of the school committee. Just as we had convened our meeting at the beginning, I'll need to take a motion to adjourn from one of my members in order to adjourn our meeting because we have a quorum here, if that's okay with you at this time.
Okay,
Is there a motion from one of the school committee members to adjourn our subcommittee meeting at this time?
So moved. Ashley Cleary.
Motion made by Mrs. Colery. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Marr. All in favor, roll call. Mrs. Colery.
Aye.
Mr. Kearney's absent. Mrs. Marr.
Aye.
Mrs. St. Ange.
Aye.
Aye, Craig McClellan. That motion passes at 8:19 p.m. This meeting's adjourned. Mr. Chairperson, thank you.
you're welcome entirely.
Thanks
Thank
very
you all
much.
very much. Have a lovely
Thank
day.
you. And
Yep.
I'll get that information out.
We're now going to get more confused with the Capital Stabilization Fund, which Brian and I had a conversation earlier today about it, trying to understand the spreadsheet that we have, and came to the conclusion that we really need to sit down with Don Piat and go through it in detail. We think there are things in there that are, I'm going to say, not in the appropriate place or maybe incorrect or what have you. And so to use it as a guide at this point doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know if anybody on capital budgets had a chance to really look at it. And if so, if you have any questions about it.
Well, certainly, thanks to Brian, I certainly looked at it closely. Very hard to figure out exactly what is here and why it's here. Just to give you a sense of the sort of the impossible, why it's so impossible to actually deal with this. There are several different spreadsheets, as you know. There's the detailed capitalization, there's the recap, there's the operating, the OS principle, and so on. If you even look at the detailed capital stabilization fund itself, you will see that in fact it's after you go from 1 to 8, there are no entries, and then you jump to 43. Okay, but if you actually go into any individual item, it refers back to numbers somewhere between 8 and 42. So this thing isn't even complete, as it turns out, as a document. And when you do click on something, sometimes it refers to a completely different spreadsheet, which does not seem to be, doesn't refer very well back to this one. So I think this is rife with errors, to be perfectly honest with you. And you really can't sort out exactly how much roll-off, quite frankly, we actually can expect to see, although it looks very small, okay, at this stage. Certainly 2023 looks, 2022 looks ridiculous. And at the same time, we are really highly dependent on the town meeting, either the regular or special, granting us a fair amount of money. Actually, our entire budget's going to end up being whatever we're going to get from the town meeting rather than what we're going to get on roll-off, as it turns out. Mm-hmm. So there's just a whole slew of things about how are we funding anything going forward, and what will we have to have as a stabilization fund to cover all of these items and which of them are real and which are not. For example, is the 15 million for a new police station real or not real? Is the new town hall at another 15 million real or not real? I mean,
Yeah,
you
and the
can't have
amount
a
that
stabilization fund of this the way we're actually dealing with this now. So
the 6 million for town hall, I don't think is very accurate.
no, it's not. Most of this is not accurate.
More like 10 million, but
Yeah, well, it's like 15. Yeah. So the real problem is it's impossible to figure out how, in fact, we will fund things going forward and where that money is going to come from based on what we have now.
I agree with you, Ralph.
Yeah. This does
I'm
not.
in mass confusion on it.
That's right. We're flying blind. Even in spending for 22, we're flying blind. To be perfectly honest with you. So.
Well, one thing that caught my eye that is conclusive, no matter how flawed the spreadsheet is that even though it may exclude things and it may undercalculate the transfers into the stabilization fund, it does aggregate debt very quickly. So, I'm just looking at the detailed capital stabilization fund spreadsheet. It's sheet number 2 in this spreadsheet. What you see is that if we just start bonding the things that people anticipate that we're going to be bonding, on top of what we've already bonded in years past, our debt service ramps really aggressively to the point where it's in fiscal 24, it would reach $1.6 million a year. And in fiscal 24, we're only seeing, hold on a second, a transfer into the fund at town meeting of $2 million. So that would leave us a net of $400,000 that we could actually use to fund the capital requests coming from the various town departments and the schools. Obviously, that number doesn't even begin to cut it. And so the model then assumes that we're going to fund the ongoing requests that exceed $400,000 by drawing down the capital stabilization fund to zero, which happens the next year. And then somehow we're going to run it in deficit the year after that. Now, obviously, there's no negative balance that's going to happen. So there's an assumption that we're going to be borrowing debt to pay off old debt at that point. The model's broken, but the philosophy is perhaps worse. So I think it's really important to see these numbers and recognize that we do have this. I'll use a COVID analogy, a surge of funding cases over the course of the next year or two. And we really need to work aggressively to flatten the curve. I mean, if it's a 2 to 3 year bulge, maybe we need to stretch it out to a 3 to 5 year bulge just to make sure that we don't overwhelm, the funding capabilities of capital budget, just given the appropriations that are going to be coming in. That's the biggest takeaway I take from this model. But yeah, I also believe that there's a mechanical issue in the spreadsheet that is resulting in transfers into the fund each year, appropriations that are lower than I think mechanically they should be.
Agreed with everything you've said, and it points out the fallacy of some of our requesters who think, oh, don't worry, just bond it. Well, bonding it comes back and hits you in the face. And eventually you get to a point that all you're doing is paying debt service, not taking care of things you should be doing. I had a sort of philosophy that anything under 500,000, we should definitely pay cash for. 500 to $1 million, try to pay cash if you could. And over $1 million, you're probably going to have to bond. I don't know whether that's a good philosophy or not, but I think we need to start with something to rein in the bond it.
Yeah, I guess the problem, what you've said, Sam, makes a lot of sense. The problem is that I think when people hear, oh, if it's over $1 million, bond it, it doesn't register that we start paying that back the very next year, and the very next year it constrains our ability to spend on other things.
Yep.
I just don't think that, everyone else is sort of contemplating that it's going to constrain what they can actually get from capital in the future when they bond things.
Mhm.
And I think the way that we should think about it and do our best to articulate to everyone we interact with is that, even big items, we should do everything possible to pay for them in cash, because sooner or later we will pay for them in cash. If we bond them now, we're paying the debt for debt service, next year and the year after in cash. So sooner or later, we're paying for all of it in cash. We should do everything we can to pay for the big items in cash. Some of them aren't going to fit in a given appropriation year, right? And then perhaps you use debt. But even in that case, I'm not a big fan of doing long-term funding. I mean, if it doesn't fit in 1 year, then let's pay for it over 2. But as soon as you bond it and say pay for it over 20,
You're locked into that for 20 years.
You're locked into that for 20 years. You're going to pay cash for it sooner or later. And all you've done is reduce the amount of money that you can spend on other things in the future years, right?
Yep.
I mean, it really is nothing more than a shell game. And it's not a zero-sum game because there's interest in there as well, right? Sooner or later, we pay cash for every single thing. And we should just do that as we go and not kid ourselves into believing that, that bonding this long-term somehow alleviates that. If we have to spread it over a couple of years, we'll spread it over a couple of years, but.
Yeah, it's definitely a more realistic picture when you're doing cash.
It's what's
To look at it in the short term, you get a better reality.
Right. It's like, okay, we can't pay for the whole thing this year. We'll pay for it over 3 years or 2 years.
Yep.
One of the things we're definitely going to hear from somebody is, oh, well, interest rates are low, so we should borrow long-term now.
There are a couple of our selectmen who think that.
Right. Unfortunately, you have to think beyond the next 12 months. So that philosophy is great if you're going to spread it out over 20 years, and then you're going to set aside cash every year for some other big item that you wouldn't have bonded, 5 or 10 years out, right? Yep. But the reality is, we're pressured, or perhaps more accurately termed, forced to spend every dollar that comes into capital every year. There's never going to be a rainy day fund built in any material way. And we're certainly not going to pre-fund a major capital expenditure that we anticipate 5 or 10 years out, because there's just always a need for the cash. So the idea that we should, borrow long-term because interest rates are cheap now and they're going to be higher later, the math doesn't work when you actually lay it out over a long term.
Agreed.
Can I make
Yeah,
a suggestion here? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Francine.
Go ahead,
I was going to ask what is probably a stupid question, but if we bond it, is it automatically paid over 20 years, or you can't opt for something shorter?
Depends on the life of the asset.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
You can go shorter, you just can't go longer.
Okay.
Yeah, if you bonded a truck, you'd probably want to do 4 or 5 years.
That's what I was curious about. Some of these assets, like even the turf, I've heard bonding tossed around.
Here's a great example that we're dealing with now, the turf field.
Yeah.
Getting into the turf field, you sort of discover that these things have a life of maybe 10 to 15 years, depending on which one and usage and so forth. The schools rent out the turf field to other organizations for certain activities. And they take that rent and offset that their budget to reduce, their expenses. They probably really ought to take that rental money and put it into a sinking fund and start saving for the replacement of the turf field that they're going to have to replace in another 10 or 15 years anyway.
Sam, I think they did that more recently.
Older to go through another giant fundraiser.
Can I make a suggestion here? First off, Brian, thank you for that analysis. That helps me tremendously. My suggestion is this, is that we take Brian's perspectives and we issue some kind of white paper statement to the select board and to the town that places our concerns for future spending over the next few years and debt service, and how we cannot look at bonding as a solution, that we have to pay cash whenever and wherever possible. Just those statements, so that puts us loud and clear with everyone that is looking for some funding in ways that we know is not prudent. So that's one suggestion. The other suggestion would be a special session with Don Pyatt to have a long heart-to-heart on the capital stabilization fund, and trying to get ourselves on the same page, level set with Don, with Chris Senior, with ourselves, and with advisory. So we all have a good, solid fiscal foundation for what the town is facing before we go much further into our deliberations on, you know, what can we spend.
Agreed. Well, Brian and I've reached out to Don Piat to find out when he's available, but Brian and I are going to get into the current stabilization fund spreadsheet and try to get it cleaned up a little bit. We don't think it's as accurate as it should be, and it's also confusing the way it's set up. It's not simple, and I'm a KISS principle person.
I would certainly appreciate Don walking us through it. Or maybe I should set up a meeting with him, but I would want to know
Well,
if
you
the
can
others.
throw with the advisory committee, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should definitely do that, Michael. I guess Sam, the point that, you know, Sam and I want to focus on before a broad group meeting is we actually think there are some mistakes in this model.
Yep.
That's probably not gracefully covered in a committee setting.
No, you nail that down first, you know, do the pre-work.
Right.
And then let's have that more, that broader discussion on setting forth the reality of our situation, and give everyone, this is the time of day, folks. This is what the town is facing, and there is not a fiscally prudent way to go forward and underwrite all of these town capital projects, because the debt will kill us.
Yeah.
Will choke us.
Right. Look, the good news is, you know, there are substantial appropriations coming to capital each year. I mean, it's roughly $2 million coming in each year. So as long as we don't bury ourselves under, you know, under debt payment obligations, we actually have a lot of capacity to fund things in cash. You know, we can fund $1 million project in a given year and still have another $1 million left over to, you know, fund all the smaller requests. We just can't be funding multiple, you know, million plus projects in a given year.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly with regards to some of these really big projects, you know, police stations, town halls, things of that nature, you know, there's more work to be done to figure out how to make that fit.
Well, I'm on the town hall building committee, and I'm lobbying them to, whatever the town hall project comes in at, to do it with excluded debt if possible. We have some pretty significant roll-offs coming on excluded debt. So while it is a direct impact on your tax rate, there should be items coming off to offset that, so you won't see any huge change in your taxes other than what Mary Quill wants to raise every year.
The only problem with that, Sam, is that when we as a town voted that excluded debt, some of us had an expectation that our taxes would go down once that debt was paid off, that otherwise it becomes a permanent tax increase that never went through the proper process for going beyond Prop 2.5. So
Well,
that's
Mike,
just a
you're
philosophical.
absolutely right. But what happens is things are not equal or level. You know, every year the levy can go up 2.5%. So that automatically starts to increase your taxes unless you can get the valuations to jump up through the roof, which may happen with some of the tear downs and rebuilds that are happening.
Right. Okay. That was just a little soapbox stuff there.
Okay, the couple of things. One is I do believe we need a philosophy of what gets bonded and what doesn't. Certainly you can talk about a town hall, for example, with a 20-year bond. But when you get down to 10-year and 5-year bonding of rather small items, it makes no sense. So you got to have a philosophy to start with. The second, I think, is really clear to me that you better do some what ifs. What if, in fact, we do actually have to put a town hall in? How does that fit within the available money? Okay. And I would say two ways. One is with excluded debt and without excluded debt. In other words, you really have to play the scenarios out. And the second or third thing I'll tell you is that do not think this town is going to vote for excluded debt. They are not. I don't think there's any chance. They didn't last time, and there's far less chance this time. And I think that's the general feeling in this town. If you don't know that, you ought to know that. That what's going to happen is that you can make all these predictions about what we'll do, and that just simply they all fall apart as usual. And finally, what was actually agreed to by the selectmen, and I verified this with Kevin McCarthy, is that the town, that is the selectmen agreed that the new town hall would be funded within the operating budget. And that was voted, so you can look it up, that was voted. And yet we're now talking about, nope, we're going to go do excluded debt. That you just can't simply tell people one thing and do something else. It just, it's, you know, I don't know. It's people are not thinking very clearly about all of this. So.
Yeah, but Ralph, if you try to do it within the operating budget, you don't do anything for the next 10 years or so.
Well, that really is not true. That we have added multiple numbers of employees, many of them, and we're chewing up money between them and consultants today, hundreds of thousands of dollars every single year.
Yeah.
I mean, you know that. And so what's really happened is not that we didn't have the money, it's how we used the money. So we're spending at a phenomenal rate. As I told Brian earlier today, you can look at all your town reports. We're increasing our actual spending every year by 4%. We've been doing that for years and years now. And yet you say, where's that money coming from if you only have 2.5%? Well, it came from roll-off to some degree, but it also came from new construction. But that's not going to continue. We're not living within our means. Simply are not. So, and you can't keep saying to the taxpayers, you pay for this. We've had no inflation in the past 4 years, and yet we pay 2.5% additional on our taxes every year. This is not a good scenario for this town.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Right.
Well, anybody have any other thoughts about the stabilization fund, taxes, spending?
Just a question, and I hope I have the right spreadsheet up. It's the fund analysis of January 11, 2021. It was something you attached to an email, Sam.
That's
What
correct.
is it? Michael, I can't quite understand what you're saying.
The name of the spreadsheet I have open is Capital Stabilization Fund Analysis, January 11, 2021.
Yeah, I think that's the most recent one.
Okay, so in looking at column P, which is fiscal year 22, that's the one under consideration now.
Which sheet are you on, Michael?
I'm sorry. I believe that would be recap, right? Yes, that's first tab, recap.
Yep.
Okay.
So the balance forward is 3.0 million. And then there is a deposit of 2 million.
Yep.
I'm trying to get to the number that we have to allocate for all of these special requests. And I believe that's row 24, 2.12 million for FY22. Do I have that right?
You do. That's what it says, right? Yep.
No, that's the ending balance, Michael.
Okay.
That rolls over to become the balance forward in the fiscal 23 column too.
All right. So what I'm trying to understand is
It's line 20 is your capital plan expenditure. Well, your uses are 20, 21, and 22. So you get debt service of 940.
Oh, okay. And so we're thinking that we'll have exactly 2 million to allocate after we take care of debt service.
Right, because there's an assumption that we're right. And notice the debt service goes from 240 to 940. That's based on the new debt that people assume we're going to be taking on this year to fund the various requests.
Right. Very good. That helps just me to get a handle.
Right. So it goes from 240 last year to 940, you know, very quickly goes up to 16 in fiscal 24 and virtually wipes out the entire funding capacity of capital budget.
Right. And next year we'll have 1.25 to hand out versus 2 million this year.
Well, he's assuming that we level spend at 1.25 million.
Okay.
In all these future years, despite the fact that we will actually not have 1.25 million to spend.
Right. I'll leave that for another day, but yes, thank you. Thank you for explaining that.
Which is why if you look at the capital stabilization fund balance, which is line 24, right?
Yep.
Goes from 3 million in 21 to 2 million in 22 to 17 to 850 to 64 to negative in fiscal 26.
Right. If everything stays that way, which
Right.
can't happen.
Until fiscal 32.
Right.
Right.
I should
So
live
needless
so
to say,
long.
this isn't happening.
All right. Thank you.
Starting with the idea that we're going to bond all these expenditures, you know, this year.
Oh, that's the fallacy. We can't do that.
Oh, we can't do it and fund anything for any of the departments next year if we do. So we might as well get ahead of this now. I mean, we just basically, again, we can fund $1 million projects in cash in year. We just can't do multiple. So we need to spread these out.
Yeah.
And
Can't do everything at once.
I really hope that we issue some kind of formal statement, formal paper to the select board, to advisory, to the town that warns of our precarious situation.
Our situation is not precarious. It's just that the plan that's being suggested to us is a non-starter.
Okay, fair enough.
We've got plenty of money in the fund that we
message
can actually
needs to
spend
get
a lot
out there.
this year. We just can't overspend year after year after year.
And I think we need to get ahead of a sentiment that feels that, oh, we got it. We can borrow it. I feel we need to to negate that sentiment. We need to argue against it early and often.
Well, it's right here in this, in the spreadsheet. We just need to take people, drag them to it, force them to look at it, and see that it's a train wreck.
Right.
I mean, if you look at the total capital requests we get generally every year, the total of those requests is running in the $4 to $5 million range. And we only have maybe 2 million that we're going to spend. So that puts it right out there. I mean, you get the schools asking for about $4 million, and you tell them, well, we can't do everything. And I don't know if they believe you, but.
Right.
Well, we just need to keep having the conversation until we find a way to make everyone understand.
Yeah, right. That's true.
I'd asked a question a meeting or two ago about prioritization and you replied that, yes, capital budget has a template that it uses to try and prioritize the spending. At what point do we bring in that template?
Once we get through listening to everybody's requests and what they want to do, and we have our questions answered, we'll then sit down and try to go through them and prioritize on a town-wide basis what we should do. We tried to create a model that sort of works, but I don't know how well it works. And I'm open to any suggestions. So we should think about it
Okay.
if we can.
Well, I'll put something together that, keeping it simple. And if you do have that, that template that you were using, I know, I guess it's in the request form that the town departments hand in, where they give us a score on a number of criteria.
Yeah, I don't think that's on the request form they're sending in. I can send you a copy of it, Michael.
Yeah, let me just,
I'll send everybody
try
a
to
copy.
see if I can come up with something that is simple and user-friendly to help us weigh all of the competing requests, because that's really what we're up against. Everybody has a valid reason, and you know, we're there with the sword and the baby trying to cut it up.
What's more valid, one or the other?
Yeah.
We spent a considerable amount of time on that last year, but then they didn't want to use the form.
Excuse me, Susan?
We spent, I think, 3 or 4 meetings on that last year.
Yeah.
Develop it, and then we were told they did not want to use the form.
Well, at their own risk then, because then we'll make the decision for them.
Yeah.
You know, for those who actually did, I'm going to give more credence to those people who I feel have been thoughtful and make an argument for why their spending should get the priority. Just my take on the situation.
Well, I will send out the last version of this town-wide prioritization, and then we can start thinking about it in terms of the requests that we have. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
I've answered them all. Thank you.
Well, if anybody wants to go home or go to bed, well, you're all at home anyway, but go to bed and close the meeting, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So I can crawl in bed and then vote?
Why not?
Okay. I move we adjourn for one night, for this night.
Any second?
Second?
All those in favor? Ralph?
Aye.
Brian? I don't know where Brian is. Mike?